Hello everyone, here we are. We're going to pick up at 2 Samuel chapter 16. We're going to do 16, 17, and 18. So let's get going. Now, if you remember, Absalom has challenged his father and has set himself up in Hebron, where his father ruled for 7 years as king, and he's now set himself up there with the help of somebody named Ahithophel. And they are trying to steal Absalom's father, David. They're trying to steal David's kingdom, okay? So here we go. When David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, there was Ziba, Z-I-B-A, the steward of Mephibosheth. Remember, he had the 2 lame feet, and he was in the family. He was Jonathan's son in Saul's family. The steward of Mephibosheth waiting to meet him. He had a string of donkeys saddled and loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisins, 100 cakes of figs, and a skin of wine. Now, I'm assuming that that's probably a large skin of wine. The king asked Ziba, "Why have you brought these?" Because David is now evacuating so that he doesn't get killed by Absalom and Absalom's men as they come to take over. Ziba answered, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on. The bread and fruit are for the men to eat, and the wine is to refresh those who become exhausted in the wilderness." The king then said, "Where is your master's grandson?" So he's asking Ziba, where is Mephibosheth's grandson? Ziba said to him, "He's staying in Jerusalem because he thinks today the Israelites will restore to me my grandfather's kingdom." So he thinks Saul's kingdom is going to return, okay? He doesn't understand what's going on exactly. Then the king said to Ziba, "All that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours." "I humbly bow," Ziba said. "May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king." So he just took it all away from Mephibosheth's family and gave it to his servant because the family is clearly, their hearts are not with David. They're still with the kingdom of Saul, which, you know, is understandable being that they're Saul's line, okay? They probably blame David for everything, even though the Lord arranged everything. As David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shemel, son of Gera. And he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops and the special guard were on David's right and left. As he cursed them, Shemel said, get out, you murderer, you scoundrel." So now everybody who didn't like David is coming out of the woodwork because they think David's going to be overthrown. All right. "The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul." Isn't it terrible when people slander you and they get the wrong story and they don't see the Lord in it at all? You know, it reminds me of the way Gabrielle, my daughter, made this incredible story about me taking custody of Juliet, which I won by default. You know, she made up this whole story that I was some lonely old lady who needed a child. I mean, come on. Nobody does that. I mean, we all know children cost about $250,000 each, right? And I was a single parent with a kind heart, and I was in love with my granddaughter. She was my first one. But, you know, the story has been rolled out. I mean, if I was that lonely, couldn't I have just joined a friendship club? I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny because it's slander. And it's the story that's been floated to probably hundreds of people. So, and you can't say anything. You just have to be quiet and let the Lord defend his own reputation. And what did I tell you? The Lord woke me up 3 times saying, go get the baby. But you can't tell the godless something like that, because that goes right over their head. They'll just, if they're forced to look at it, they'll just call you insane. Okay, so that's what this reminds me of. He's blaming David for what bloodshed in Saul's household. You know, I mean, in reality, right? I mean, David was Saul's servant and did his very, very best to serve him, and certainly didn't kill him while Saul was pursuing him. You know, there's all these experiences that this Shmuel probably knows nothing about. And he's just, you know, it's sort of like the Biden versus Trump voter people. You know, it's like we don't understand each other. The Biden voters don't understand the Trump voter. Matter of fact, a very good friend of mine and I today, she said to me, I can't understand how you and I enjoy the same things. She's not a believer yet. But she says, you know, we enjoy all the same things, but we see Biden so differently. And she's awesome. You know, she lets me speak my mind. She doesn't rebuke me. She gets me, you know, and she said, I know that you're kind. I know you're good-hearted and kind, and I know you're just speaking your truth. And she's just awesome, and it blessed my heart. And I just told her, bless you, lovely lady. But so this is what this reminds me of. You know, Saul caused his own death. You know, does Shmuel know about Saul raising the dead? You know, it's just weird. It's like in the narcissism psychology realm, we call people like that who blindly follow crooked people, we call them flying monkeys, like the Wicked Witch of the West had her flying monkeys. So Shmuel is a flying monkey for Saul's household. He doesn't understand he has no understanding, and he's pelting the Lord's chosen. And David suffered to come to the kingdom that the Lord had given him and anointed him for. He paid the price, you know. All right. Sort of like I told you, Joyce Myers said, you know, I'm sick of people being jealous of me, of my relationship with God, when they're not willing to do what I did to get it, to have it. And that's exactly it. I mean, I've bent myself in two and laid low and prostrated myself in front of the Lord as much, and the Lord's enabled me to do it. But I mean, I've given up everything. And so, you know, especially if you fast things, the Lord's going to come and talk to your face. I've been fasting a lot of things for a long time. You know, things that were natural to me once are not what I practice anymore. You know, and that's a fast. I mean, by rights, I could be out there, you know, using my body any way I wanted, but I don't feel I have that right. I'm in chains to Christ, and I love him more. And that should be a strong testimony to you as to the reality of Jesus, that I love him that much, that I've given away these things that are instinct. I mean, sex is an instinct, like sleep and eating. But it's okay. All right, so I don't want to get lost in my thoughts here. I just want to say that this is how slanderers are. They come out of the box screaming, and it's just because they hated you to begin with. Usually it's jealousy, okay? And I heard something today where somebody said, you know, they are going to be jealous of your anointing. Now, I'm not talking about you guys. I'm talking about the people that don't know the Lord, who see me doing my thing and see red. You know, just absolutely vicious jealousy, and it's out there. Matter of fact, on YouTube, I had some guy who thinks he's a pastor and he's not known anywhere. I don't know where he is. He was hiding behind his profile. You couldn't figure out who he was. But he basically told me in some kind of weird comment, which I deleted and reported him. He found me on Facebook and sent me a message saying being beautiful won't lead anybody to the Lord, basically, and talked about how women were evil. But it was all biblical in his mind, what he was telling me. So, you know, I mean, these people are out there, and you just have to keep following the Lord, not looking right or left. So let's get back to it. So Shmuel says, the Lord's repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you've reigned. The Lord has given the kingdom into the hands of your son Absalom. You've come to ruin because you're a murderer. And I'll tell you something, if you've never been betrayed and slandered, man, you just do not know how painful it is. And it's frustrating. And the pain, part of the pain is the frustration that you can't fight back. I mean, what are you going to do? Get in the ring and start throwing slurs at them and trying to defend yourself? It's useless. I mean, even in court over custody of Juliet, my granddaughter, It was useless. There was an avalanche of lies pouring out of my daughter's mouth about me. It was unbelievable. And one thing the enemy loves to do to me since I was an abused child is to call me an abuser. Okay, that's what he loves to do, that because he knows it hurts me, right? But I've started to understand that that's a tactic that he uses because I'm so against abusing young people after what I went through. So, you know, he's just, man, I'm telling you, someone described it like this once. The enemy will punch you on the back of the head, and the minute you go down, he'll knee you in the face. Okay? I mean, he is playing for keeps, and he's vicious. All right. So here we go. Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head. I have to admit, the flesh screams out, you know, Lord, sick 'em, get 'em. Maybe not to death, but these are warriors talking, okay? You know, so he's just, you know, he's just like, let me go end this. But the king said, what does this have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he's cursing because the Lord said to him, curse David, who can ask, why do you do this? Okay, that's pretty humble. Never would have thought of that one. David then said to Abishai and all his officials, my son, my own flesh and blood, is trying to kill me. Boy, do I know that feeling. I actually told Gabrielle once that I was afraid of her because I was afraid she was going to try to kill me. And she gave me some kind of maudlin crying, you know, but do I trust my daughter, Gabrielle? No, heck no. She may have improved. I don't know. I don't know her anymore for the last few years, but she has scared me a couple of times. You know, she's gotten so out there because, you know, anyway, all right. So she scared me, all right? So I understand this emotion. My son, my own flesh and blood, is trying to kill me. How much more then this Benjamite? In other words, my own son's trying to kill me. How much more a stranger like this guy? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore to me his covenant blessing instead of his curse today. So David's seeing it in a much broader view, much more mature than I can be. So David and his men continued along the road with Shemel, while Shemel was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went and throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. Yeah, David's much more mature. I'm not there yet. I'm not mature like this, man. I would just be like, let me at him, you know? But that's why I was not born King David, okay? The king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted, and there he refreshed himself. The Lord didn't make me a queen or a king regardless, okay? So, you know, the Lord knows me better than I know myself, and he knew right where to place me. Okay, meanwhile, Absalom and all the men of Israel came to Jerusalem. So now they're in David's city, the city of David. And Ahithophel was with him. That's the advisor. Then Hushai, the Archite, David's confidant, went to Absalom and said to him, long live the king, long live the king. Absalom said to Hushai, so this is the love you show your friend? If he's your friend, why didn't you go with him? Hushai said to Absalom, no, the one chosen by the Lord, by these people and by all the men of Israel, his I will be, and I will remain with him. Furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve the son, just as I served your father? So I will serve you. This may be one of the ones that David sent back to spy out the situation for him. Absalom said to Ahithophel, give us your advice. What should we do? Ahithophel answered, sleep with your father's concubines, whom he left to take care of the palace. Remember, he left 10 concubines. Then all Israel will hear that you've made yourself obnoxious to your father, and the hands of everyone with you will be more resolute. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he slept with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. This sounds like the curse that the Lord gave to David through Nathan when David went and slept with Bathsheba. Remember, he said, I'm going to take your wives and have them in the arms of someone else in front of all Israel. Well, here it is, and it was his son. Ow. Now, in those days, the advice Ahithophel gave was like that of one who inquires of God, so he appeared to be godly. That was how both David and Absalom regarded all of Ahithophel's advice. Okay. 2 Samuel 17. Ahithophel said to Absalom, I would choose 12,000 men and set out tonight in pursuit of David. I would attack him while he's weary and weak. I would strike him with terror, and then all the people with him will flee. I would strike down only the king and bring all the people back with you. Well, this is pretty bold. The death of the man you seek will mean the return of all. All the people will be unharmed. This plan seemed good to Absalom and to all the elders of Israel. They're not even thinking about the Mosaic law, the 10 Commandments. What is it? The fifth commandment is honor your father and your mother so that you might have long life. Wow, talk about whoop, right over Absalom's head. He's a fool, guys. He's a fool. But Absalom said, summon also Hushai the Archite so we can hear what he has to say as well. When Hushai came to him, Absalom said, Ahithophel has given his advice. Should we do what he says? If not, give us your opinion. Hushai replied to Absalom, the advice Ahithophel has given is not good this time. You know your father and his men, they're fighters, and as fierce as a wild bear robbed of her cubs. Besides, your father is an experienced fighter. He won't spend the night with the troops. Even now, he's hidden in a cave or some other place. If he could attack your troops first, whoever hears about it will say, if he should attack your troops first, whoever hears about it will say, there's been a slaughter among the troops who follow Absalom. Then even the bravest soldier whose heart's like the heart of a lion will melt with fear, for all Israel knows that your father's a fighter and that those with him are brave. So I advise you, let all Israel from Dan to Beersheba, as numerous as the sand on the seashore, be gathered to you with you yourself leading them into battle. Then we'll attack him wherever he may be found and will fall on him as dew settles on the ground. Neither he nor any of his men will be left alive. If he withdraws into a city, then all Israel will bring ropes to that city and will drag it down to the valley until not so much as a pebble is left. Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than that of Ahithophel, for the Lord had determined to frustrate the good advice of Ahithophel in order to bring disaster on Absalom. God does not care for rebellious children who dishonor their parents. Keep my daughter in your prayers. Hushai said, or I should say, join me in praying for her, because what I say to the Lord is, don't harm her, Father. Please don't kill my kid. I love my daughter, but sheesh, what she has done, you don't do that to one of God's. You don't do that to someone who is solidly a child of God. No, you don't do it, and she's done it. So I pray for mercy, okay? All right, and that wars with my flesh, because my flesh wants to say, get her, Lord, get her. But you know what? She's my daughter, and she'll always be my little girl no matter what she's doing, okay? I may not know her anymore. I may never know her again, but in my heart, that's always my little girl, okay? And if anyone hurt her, and I've done it before, when people have hurt her, I've gone to bat. And it is totally like a bear without cubs. I have gone to bat for that girl, okay? Hushai told Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, Ahithophel has advised Absalom and the elders of Israel to do such and such, but I've advised them to do so and so. Now send a message at once and tell David, don't spend the night at the fords in the wilderness. Okay, so this is David's spy. Cross over without fail, or the king and all the people with him will be swallowed up. Jonathan and Ahimaaz were staying at En-Rogel, E-N, as second word, R-O-G-E-L. A female servant was to go and inform them, and they were to go and tell King David, for they could not risk being seen entering the city. Remember, these are the two sons of these two men that are on David's side. But a young man saw them and told Absalom. So the two of them left at once and went to the house of a man in Bahurim. He had a well in his courtyard, and they climbed down into it. They're scared. They're hiding. His wife took a covering and spread it out over the opening of the well and scattered grain over it. No one knew anything about it. When Absalom's men came to the woman at the house, they asked, where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan? The woman answered them, they crossed over the brook. The men searched but found no one, so they returned to Jerusalem. After they'd gone, the two climbed out of the well and went to inform King David. They said to him, set out and cross the river at once. Ahithophel has advised such and such against you. So David and all the people with him set out and crossed the Jordan. By daybreak, no one was left who had not crossed the Jordan. When Ahithophel saw that his advice had not been followed, he saddled his donkey and set out for his house in his hometown. He put his house in order and then hanged himself. So he died and was buried in his father's tomb. And there goes a bad counselor. Bye-bye. When Ahithophel saw that his advice had not been followed, because he's in trouble now, he's going to be looked at as someone who gave foolish advice. He saddled his donkey, set out for his house in his hometown, put his house in order, and then hanged himself. So he died and was buried in his father's tomb. David went to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. Absalom had appointed Amasa over the army in place of Joab. Amasa was the son of Jether, an Ishmaelite, Ishmael. The other son of Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac. Isaac being the son of the promise, Ishmael the son of the bondwoman or the slave woman. Amasa was the son of Jether, an Ishmaelite, who had married Abigail, the daughter of Nahash and sister of Zeruiah, the mother of Joab. The Israelites, sister of Zeruiah, the mother of Joab. Okay, let me figure this out here. Amasa was the son of Jether, who was an Ishmaelite, who had married Abigail, who was the daughter of Nahash and sister of Zeruiah, the mother of Joab. Okay, so that's interesting. So the two leaders of the armies, Joab and Amasa, Joab for David, Amasa for Absalom, are basically from the same family. The Israelites and Absalom camped in the land of Gilead. When David had come to Mahanaim, Shobi, son of Nahash from Rabbah of the Ammonites, and Makir, son of Amiel from Lodabar, and Barzillai the Gileadite from Rogelim, brought bedding and bowls and articles of pottery. They also brought wheat and barley, flour and roasted grain, beans and lentils, honey and curds, sheep and cheese from cow's milk for David and his people to eat. For they said, the people have become exhausted and hungry and thirsty in the wilderness. Okay, last chapter for the night. Here we go. 18, 2 Samuel 18. David mustered the men who were with him and appointed over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. David sent out his troops, a third under the command of Joab, a third under Joab's brother Abishai, son of Zeruiah, and a third under Ittai the Gittite. The king told the troops, I myself will surely march out with you. But the men said, you must not go out. If we're forced to flee, they won't care about us. Even if half of us die, they won't care. But you're worth 1,000 of us. It'd be better now for you to give us support from the city. The king answered, I'll do whatever seems best to you. So the king stood beside the gate while his men marched out in units of hundreds and thousands. The king commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake. And see, that's how I feel about Gabrielle, my daughter. And all the troops heard the king give orders concerning Absalom to each of the commanders. In other words, don't kill him. David's army marched out of the city to fight Israel, and the battle took place in the forest of Ephraim. There, Israel's troops were routed by David's men, and the casualties that day were great, 20,000 men. The battle spread out over the whole countryside, and the forest swallowed up more men that day than the sword. So David's winning. Now, Absalom happened to meet David's men. He was riding his mule, and as the mule went under the thick branches of a large oak, Absalom's hair got caught in the tree. Remember the hair of Absalom? Absalom weighing 200 shekels when he cut it off every year or two? He was left hanging in midair while the mule he was riding kept on going. If that isn't humiliating, I don't know what is. And oftentimes hair represents pride. So So he's hanging by his hair from this tree. When one of the men saw what had happened, he told Joab, I just saw Absalom hanging in an oak tree. Joab said to the men who told him this, what? You saw him? Why didn't you strike him to the ground right there? Then I would have had to give you 10 shekels of silver and a warrior's belt. I wonder if that's like a wrestling belt, probably. But the WWE belts. But the man replied, even if 1,000 shekels were weighed out into my hands, I wouldn't lay a hand on the king's son. In our hearing, the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, protect the young man Absalom for my sake, And if I had put my life in jeopardy and nothing is hidden from the king, you would have kept your distance from me. And if I had put my life in jeopardy and nothing is hidden from the king, you would have kept your distance from me. So I guess he's saying, I'm not going to do something the king has told me not to do. And if you knew that I was that stalwart and obeying the king, you would have stayed away from me and telling me anything about cutting him down. Joab said, I'm not going to wait like this for you. So he took 3 javelins in his hand and plunged them into Absalom's heart while Absalom was still alive in the oak tree. And 10 of Joab's armor bearers surrounded Absalom, struck him, and killed him. Though he basically just got hacked to bits hanging in that tree by his hair. Then Joab sounded the trumpet, and the troops stopped pursuing Israel, for Joab halted them. They took Absalom, threw him into a big pit in the forest, and piled up a large heap of rocks over him. Meanwhile, all the Israelites fled to their homes. Can you imagine how scared they are? Because now David's going to come back and know that, he's going to look at them all and say, I'm your king, you betrayed me, you went with my son. So we'll see if anything happens in regards to that. During his lifetime, Absalom had taken a pillar and erected it in the King's Valley as a monument to himself. Now, didn't I just say on Facebook today, it's becoming noticeable that people are always referring to themselves as, I'm an award-winning this, I'm an award-winning that. And I'm speaking of the 2 people I know that do this constantly are my daughter and my mother. Everything they talk about themselves, they are award-winning. It doesn't matter that the award, like 3 people know about it. Doesn't matter. Now, my mother did win a very big prize, the Ernest Hemingway Prize or award. So, she's got some cred, but she's 84. My daughter's half her age, 42. And I'm not going to belabor it. I'm just going to say they were the 2 that started me noticing. And then I started seeing other people doing it. And I was just like, what's going on here? Why is everybody so bent on being an award winner? I want a reward. I don't want an award. I want a reward from the king. Okay, I don't want accolades from men. Like once my daughter screamed at me, you're a great singer. Why don't you use it? Well, in my mind, I have used it in quite a few good places. Churches, Flaming Groovies, my own Christian metal band. But, she wants fame and she wants money, and my focus is not fame, certainly. I think I'd be bored just having music be my only profession. I have too much of a business head, and there's a lot of other things I love. But when she screamed that at me, like hysterically, I looked at her and I said, because I'm not trying to impress men. I'm trying to impress God. Over her head. All right. So here we go. So they threw Absalom into, so during his lifetime, Absalom had taken a pillar and erected it in the King's Valley as a monument to himself. And that's what I'm talking about. My daughter has erected quite a few monuments to herself, and my mother too. It's just constantly me, 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 and here's my poem, here's my this, it's like, oh my God, it's just, it's hard. It's hard for me to even come across. With my mother, it was such a long diatribe of award-winning. Every paragraph started with award-winning, because I was kind of social stalking her on the net, I admit. And I haven't done it for a long time, but I thought I'd look her up just to make sure. To be honest with you, I just want to make sure she's not dead. She's 84 years old, okay? So I want to make sure she's okay. So I'm kind of social, whatever you call it, creeping on the net. And I came across this thing, and every paragraph started with award-winning, award-winning, award. When it was over, like long, I was like, oh my God, automatically without thinking, I was like, oh my God, thank God that's over. I mean, people just, want to vaunt themselves in front of the Lord. And the Lord says, don't boast unless you can boast that you know the Lord. And that's one boast I can make, but I don't boast about it. Okay. So Absalom had taken a pillar and erected it, for he thought, I have no son to carry on the memory of my name. He named the pillar after himself, and it's called Absalom's Monument to this day. Now Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said, let me run and take the news to the king that the Lord has vindicated him by delivering him from the hand of his enemies. You are not the one to take the news today, Joab told him. You may take the news another time, but you must not do so today, because the king's son is dead. Then Joab said to a Cushite, go tell the king what you've seen. The Cushite bowed down before Joab and ran off. Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, again said to Joab, come what may, please let me run behind the Cushite. But Joab replied, my son, why do you want to go? You don't have any news that will bring you a reward. He said, come what may, I want to run. Joab said, run. So Joab said, run. Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and outran the Cushite. While David was sitting between the inner and outer gates, the watchman went up to the roof of the gateway by the wall. As he looked out, he saw a man running alone. The watchman called out to the king and reported it. The king said, if he's alone, he must have good news. Uh-oh. And the runner came closer and closer. Then the watchman saw another runner, and he called down to the gatekeeper, look, another man running alone. The king said, he must be bringing good news too. The watchman said, it seems to me that the first one runs like Ahimaaz, son of Zadok. He's a good man, the king said. He comes with good news. Then Ahimaaz called out to the king, all is well. He bowed down before the king with his face to the ground and said, praise be to the Lord your God. He's delivered up those who lifted their hands against my lord the king. The king asked, is the young man Absalom safe? Ahimaaz answered, I saw great confusion just as Joab was about to send the king's servant and me, your servant, but I don't know what it was. The king said, stand aside and wait here. So he stepped aside and stood there. Then the Cushite arrived and said, my lord the king, hear the good news. The Lord has vindicated you today by delivering you from the hand of all who rose up against you. The king asked the Cushite, is the young man Absalom safe? The Cushite replied, may the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up to harm you be like that young man. Uh-oh, the king was shaken. He went up to the room over the gateway and wept. As he went, he said, oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son. I can relate to that. You know, you never want to see your child die before you. So I love you guys very much, and I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll do the next 3 chapters, and then we have one more day of 3 chapters after that, and then we're done, and we go to the next book. And I can't tell you I know what that book is, but I would suspect it's the Book of Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings, or 1st King. We'll figure it out. If it's not that, it's Chronicles, but I believe it's Kings. So I love you. You have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.